Now, the wage increase impasse between government and unions continues. It seems the unions are not budging from their demands for at least a 3% increase. Is there any room for compromise? Well, let's speak to Claude Naiker from the Public Servants Association. Mr. Naiker, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. It looks like workers are rejecting government's offer. Just give us more details around that.
Yeah, thank you. Very good afternoon to you. You will recall that the government tabled an offer, albeit unofficially at that stage. The final offer officially was only tabled today. But in the interim, what we did was that we took the unofficial offer to our members for a mandate. And I think on most aspects of the agreement we agree on, but I think the issue that is posing a problem in the agreement is that the cash gratuity that employees were getting from last year continued this year. But in the draft agreement, it indicates that it will cease to exist come 1st of March or 31st of March 2023. I think employees are having a problem, and unions, we are having a problem with that key issue itself. We were wanting the employee to either propose that cash gratuity be included in the baseline salary come 1st of April next year, and that we could find each other. So at this stage, I think as the mandating process is continuing, the status is that majority of the members are unhappy with that clause, indicating, listen, we should find a way with the cash gratuity being incorporated into the basic salary increase. I think that's where we are unstuck at this stage. We'll have to further negotiate to see if we can incorporate that cash gratuity come 1st of April next year, that we can incorporate it into the baseline salary increase.
So it's not as if talks are deadlocked at the moment. It's still open to discussion?
No, not at all. You must remember that the Constitution of the Bargaining Council makes provision that once an agreement is on the table, unions have 21 days to either accept or decline the offer. If the majority of the unions do accept the offer, then you have a binding agreement on the table. And we'd all like to see that it move in that direction. However, as I indicated, it's just the cash gratuity that is giving us a problem at this stage. If the 21 days do expire, then what happens is that the entire negotiation process gets back to the bargaining council, but back to the drawing board, where we start the whole process again. And I'm sure we don't want to get to that stage because members are obviously up in arms at the length of delay that the negotiations are taking place. But unfortunately, the PSA is a mandate-driven union, and we'll only abide by what our members have actually indicated. And the cash gratuity is a thorn in the agreement now. If the employee can see it fit to incorporate it on the baseline salary increase, I'm sure we can find one another.
And I mean, also, there's also that in that situation that the same government that you are asking to pay public servants more money to seem to also sometimes forget that they themselves are public servants.
Well, you will recall that earlier this year that public officials, the president announced, were given a 3% salary increase.
That's correct, yeah.
And memories are short, as you quite rightly pointed. At that stage, we were stuck on 1.5%, 2% for ordinary public servants that are at the forefront of service delivery. And we had to very vociferously argue that how can you give one set of public servants or public officials 3%, while the people that are delivering service on a day-to-day basis is given 1.5% and 2% salary increase. So I think that paid to the argument, and the offer was obviously up to 3%. And coupled with us declaring a dispute, I think it put pressure on the employee to actually up it to 3%. It seems like the 3% looks feasible at this stage. But the cash gratuity, which actually puts more money into the pocket of employees, if that ceases to exist come 31st of March next year, I think we will be worse off than what we started off at the commence of this negotiation. So if that cash gratuity can be incorporated, as I say, into a pensionable salary increase, I'm sure employees not totally satisfied, but I can think that they can live with the offer. You must remember our initial demand was 10% and it dropped to 6% to try and find some sort of gap between us and the employer.
Yeah, and this, of course, is because of the fact that government did renege on a previous, promise that it made for 3 years of, wages for workers. So obviously, the reason you wanted that big of a hike was because of the fact that there was a year or two when public servants didn't get their salary increases. But what's your sentiment on the ground when you speak to members? I mean, we all saw what happened with Eskom when the workers there decided to down tools, even though they signed contracts to say they are an essential service. They got to a point where they decided that they will not report for duty. Are you sensing that on the ground, workers growing increasingly frustrated to a point where even someone like a nurse thinking, you know what, I might as well not go to work?
Well, it's becoming an increasing argument if you look at a state-owned entity that's plagued with problems, desperate financial trouble, and yet they are able to afford a 7% increase. What does it say for the ordinary public servants when during COVID these people went to work on a daily basis and went to save lives, and then you come initially offer 0% salary increase, then we get to 1.5%, and then we get to 2%, and then it had to take us to declare a dispute in order to get to 3%. And remember that 3% is far off from where we initially started off with 10% and even 6%. The cash gratuity, although it lends more money into the pocket of public servants, it's not a pensionable salary increase. So that doesn't help employees that are near retirement who want to save for the future and not rely on government relief and government grants, that they say, listen, we can save towards our pension and obviously live a comfortable life when we do retire. So the cash gratuity is sort of a stopgap measure to try and alleviate the problems that are currently saved by public servants. But as time goes by, the cash gratuity is not an ideal situation. You want to see an increase that is pensionable, that public servants can afford to live on a daily basis and meet the basic needs, and also save towards retirement. We have a lot of public servants. We have an aging public service as well. Public servants want to save towards retirement and live comfortably, as I indicated. But we're hoping that we can find some sort of leeway with government as far as the cash gratuity is concerned, so that we don't end up embarking on industrial action. But if that's the case, unfortunately, we've left with no option but to embark on industrial action to try and force the employer's hand.
Yeah. Mr. Naiker, I just have to ask you this last question. I'm just imagining your thoughts on what happened at the 14th National Congress of COSATU, particularly yesterday, when workers would not let the chairperson of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe, speak. And today he actually had to vacate, the event because he can see that they're going to stop him once again. We saw it on the 1st of May as well with the president. What are your thoughts around the message, basically, that the workers are giving to the ANC?
Well, this poses a question that you asked earlier on. What is the sentiment of the ground itself? These salary increases were due in April. We're now nearing the end of September, which is almost 6-7 months down the line, and they have not got an increase. That sentiment slowly but surely is going to turn to one of complete and utter frustration. And I think at the end of the day, the way our mandating process is filtering out is that employees are geared towards industrial action because they feel that is the only way to force the employers. And nobody wants to go on strike at this day and age because of the economic situation. But unfortunately, as I said, that's the only option left for us. But that clearly indicates if a small section of the public is disgruntled as to what happened at the Congress, you can imagine the greater public service, how they are feeling at this very onset as far as the way the wage negotiation has panned out. And there's no fault on the unions as to the length of time that this negotiation has taken place. You will recall that we started off with 0% salary increase. We then upped it to 1.5%, that is the employer, and then 2%, and we had to declare the dispute in order for the employer to get to 3% itself. And I think from the union side, we are making a complete compromise or a heavy compromise as to what our members initially demanded and what we hope to actually settle on. And this, coupled with the fact that we did not get the third leg of the salary increase for a complete year, it shows you how far behind that we are left as a sector in terms of getting a real wage increase itself.
Mr. Naiker, thank you very much for your time here on All Angles. That was Claude Naiker. He is from the Public Servants Association.